Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to go over a step-by-step process to help you care for your wooden tool handles. Now this is a 3 to 5 step process depending on the condition of your tool and then how far you want to take it. So the first and last step are optional. This could be as simple as 3 steps. Before we jump in, let's talk really briefly about the why and the when of doing this work. So why care for our wooden tool handles? So I can see 3 main reasons. Reason number 1, your tool handle is going to last a lot longer if you give it a little bit of ongoing care. You know, wooden hand tools are meant to give out at some point in their life, but if you care for them, they're going to last a lot longer and you're going to get more out of your initial investment that way and have less work down the line. Reason number 2, they feel better to use in your hands, right? A smooth, oiled handle feels great. A rough, crackly, splitting one, not so much. Of course, you can get away with using gloves. Nothing wrong with that, but it is great to just be able to reach for your hand tools and know they're ready to go and going to feel good in your hand. Reason number 3, perhaps less practical, one that is personally really important, and that is that it just is very satisfying to do this kind of work, to do this sort of caring for our gear. All these things are acts of tending, in the broader term of husbandry, right? Which I think is so essential to us as human beings. And so I love that about hand tools. It's not a hard job to care for your wooden handles. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of know-how. I'm going to show you some great tricks, but I think once you're done, you're going to feel a great sense of satisfaction, especially when you get them up on your shed wall, wherever you store them, and you just know they're ready and tuned up for your use. That said, when is the best time to do this? Well, there is no bad time, right, to do this job. I have never been to a garden of a friend or a farm that I've worked on or a farm that I visited and I've had a chance to see their hand tools. I've never been to one where I haven't seen at least one tool that was in need of some care. Most places I visit, there are many tools that are in need of some serious care, right? And even my own place, I probably have 10 tools lying around right now that could use some TLC. So there's no bad time to do this. If you start to feel your handle getting rough, if you start to see it checking where it's sort of separating at the grain lines, that's a really good time to do it. Winter is often the best time for me because there's less going on. There's less to do outside, right? Less busyness in my life, so that can be an option. But I would say at least once a year it's nice to do this, and if you stay on top of it, it's less work ongoing, right? Just like sharpening a knife that's really dull takes a lot of time, whereas just touching it up frequently is a very quick, easy job. Same thing with wooden tool handles. I hope this video is going to give you some good motivation and tips and tricks to get out there and do it. I'm going to share with you my very favorite oil to preserve your handle, and also want to share with you maybe a lesser known woodworking tool that could become an important part of your hand tool kit. Let's get going. So your optional step number 1 in this process is to clean your handle off. And before I just show you a couple ways you can do that, I wanted to just point out just above these 2 dots, you can see where this handle is starting to check. And as soon as you see that, you want to take some action because it's only going to get worse. The handle's only going to continue to dry out, and it's the kind of thing that can indicate that maybe some dry rot is happening inside the socket of the handle, which is where your handles often break. Often they're going to break somewhere in here. So keep an eye out for that and let your hands be your guide, as well. So cleaning your handle off, this is optional because if your handle's pretty clean, it's not an issue. But if you've got a bunch of dirt or grime on your handle, it's just going to help with step number 2, which is smoothing your handle out. So if you do have any dirt, you can use a wire brush, clean it off. A stiff bristle plastic brush can work. If it's really caked on there, you might need to get it wet and scrub it, spray it off, and then let it dry before moving on to step number 2. All right, in step number 2, we're going to smooth our tool handle. I say smooth in particular, not just sand, because the second tool I'm going to show you is not a sander or sandpaper. So that said, sandpaper is going to be probably your most common, readily available means to do this step. Depending on how rough your handle is, you could start anywhere from, say, an 80 grit paper, maybe 100 grit. You don't have to get this super duper smooth. 100 grit is probably adequate. You could go up to 120, 150 if you'd like. Right here I have some sanding discs, and of course you could use an orbital sander like these go on, but you don't have to. You can just do it by hand and use any sort of sandpaper. This handle itself is fairly rough, so I'm going to start with the 80 grit. Now I have the tool head chucked up in a vise, just a regular old shop vise, and this end of the handle is on a sawhorse. You don't need a vise. It's nice to be able to clamp a tool in some way, that way you have both hands free. But even if you just had a couple sawhorses and some C-clamps or some quick clamps, you could clamp your tool to the sawhorse or to a workbench. You don't need the vise, though it is handy. We're definitely making some headway here. It doesn't take long with fairly rough sandpaper. It's already feeling much, much better. Now the second tool I want to tell you about for the smoothing phase is called a Spokeshave. Spokeshave, as I understand it, is an old school woodworking tool that at one point was used primarily for shaving spokes on a wagon wheel, Spokeshave. Now I believe that in this day and age it's used by woodworkers who make traditional chairs and that sort of thing, green woodworking. But it can also be a handy tool to have in your hand tool kit, even if, like me, you're not really much of a woodworker. It's got two handles, and it's got a blade here, and you can see there's this throat, this metal plate where the tool will ride on whatever you're shaving, and then you can drop, raise, or lower the blade as you need to cut. So instead of using the sandpaper, we can take the Spokeshave and drag it along the tool handle to remove some of that rough, discolored wood on the outside. You can see it kind of makes these shavings, and as I said, I'm no big woodworker, so I'm sure that this could be adjusted, this tool could be adjusted to work better. But it works pretty good. And as you can imagine, let's say I was wanting to make a new handle for this shovel, and maybe I harvested a sapling from the woods, and now here I am down at this tapered end, and I want to shape it, right? I want to make it slimmer down at this end so it can fit inside the socket. Well, the Spokeshave would be a perfect tool for that. Of course, you could use a belt sander or spend a lot of time with a hand sander, but this is going to make it go much faster. It requires no electricity, and it is not disposable like sandpaper. So I think it's a worthwhile tool to have in your kit. And we're just going to continue to make our way around. And it actually leaves a finished surface. I won't need to use sandpaper after this. Cuts really nice. Okay, I'm going to switch back to the sandpaper just for demonstration purpose. Pull the tool out of the vise here. We'll finish with the 100 grit. This handle, pretty rough. It probably could have started with a 60 grit, something even coarser. Just a quick pass. It already feels worlds better than it did. So now we have our handle cleaned and smoothed by our method of choice, and now it's time for probably my favorite part, and that is the oiling process. Now, linseed oil is the classic oil for wooden tool handles. Not only does it, penetrate into the wood there and thereby, maintain the moisture and sort of preserve it, it also, when it dries, it creates almost this hard barrier, and the technical term is polymerizing. It almost turns into a sort of polymer or plastic. And that protective layer, again, is going to help maintain that moisture inside the wood and keep it from drying out and help it last. It also really beautifies the wood. Of course, that is probably less important in the garden tool world than, say, the furniture world, but nonetheless. Now, linseed oil comes from the flax plant, from flax seed. And there is something important to realize, though, about most linseed oil that is sold in hardware stores these days. So the linseed oil that you want to get is boiled linseed oil, right? Raw linseed oil takes forever to dry. It's not really what you want. But unfortunately, a lot of the so-called boiled linseed oils in hardware stores are not actually boiled, but they add chemical drying agents to the oil to make it act as if it were boiled. See, boiled linseed oil dries quickly, overnight or a day or two. It kind of acts in a way that, it just works better than the raw linseed oil. But I don't know if it's just too expensive to do it the old-fashioned way where they actually heat it up, actually boil it, but most linseed oil has icky stuff in it. So read your labels and be careful. I really am enjoying this brand of linseed oil made by a company called Tried and True, and they make it the old-fashioned way. They're actually heating it, polymerizing it, so that it acts the way we want, and then it's completely non-toxic. So I'm wearing gloves. That's mostly because I'm dealing with the camera equipment, but you can use your bare hands. It's safe for your kids. You can even use it on cutting boards and wooden utensils. It does have a stronger smell than, say, some other oils, beeswax, or that might be unpalatable, but it is completely safe to use. And I really like that about this stuff. It's a little bit more expensive than hardware store stuff, but not crazy expensive. They have a couple different varieties. The one that I like the best is the Danish oil. They have this one, it's their original wood finish, and it has beeswax in it. And it works okay, but it's really thick. It's kind of goopy. It's just not as easy to work with, where you can see this beautiful golden stuff. They also sell a varnish oil that has some kind of resin in it. But I wouldn't recommend that for tool handles. That would be better for furniture. Let's go ahead and put some of this Danish oil on our handle. With a rag. Just take little bits on the rag. And then rub it in. This handle isn't transforming the way some handles do, and just sort of explode in their warmth and color. You can see it's getting a little prettier. This handle is quite dry, and I imagine we're going to do 2 or 3 coats. First coat we'll apply here, and then we're going to let it sit for, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and wipe off any excess with a clean rag. And then we'll return tomorrow, or maybe later tonight. It's pretty dry. It's probably going to dry pretty quickly. And come back for our second coat. And don't forget to show a little bit of good attention to the end of the shovel handle here, or the eye of the garden hoe if you were using a garden hoe. Not going to be able to get that much in there, but it's nice. Just every little bit we can maintain the moisture inside the wood. Okay. It was simple as that. So as I mentioned, in about 10 minutes, we'll come back and we'll wipe this down. I won't show you that process. I don't think you need to see it. But tomorrow or later tonight, we're going to come back and apply the second coat. And at that time, I'll tell you about burnishing, which is your optional last step. Okay, we're back with the final optional step. So this has just received its second coat of oil, and then I've allowed that oil to settle in for a little while, and I've wiped off the excess. And so now we're going to burnish. And burnishing means taking some steel wool, and this is some fine steel wool, 000 steel wool, and we're just going to rub the handle. The steel wool. And I think this step is optional because it's not imperative that you do this. It's not required, right? But what I have noticed is that handles that I have burnished, and it's been some of my nicer tools like my scythe handle and some of my axes, the linseed oil seems to protect better and for longer after I burnish. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it sort of spreads out the molecules of the linseed oil. I don't know the science. If you're up on that, if you're a woodworker and you know, I'd love to know in the comments below. But again, what I've noticed is the handles where I've done this stay nicer longer. So it's a quick step. It's a couple minutes, if that. And we are done tending this handle. Now, this handle was pretty rough, as you saw when we started. But if I want to, stay on top of this, I could get away with probably once a year just coming through with the 100 grit sandpaper, or maybe 120. I don't need to go back to the 60 grit, nor do I need to bust out the Spokeshave, although I could. And give it a light sanding and then another series of oil. And I would be done. It might take me 10 minutes to do this handle, whereas maybe it took me 20 all in all, or 25 to do this of actual work time. Of course, there's some wait time. Well, guys, that wraps up this tutorial. I hope it's been helpful for you, and it gives you a bit of a nudge to get out there and give your tools some TLC. I think it'll pay off a lot in the long run. And I do appreciate you watching, as always. And if you like this video, give us a thumbs up down below or click subscribe. It does make a really big difference. And leave me a comment, good, bad, or otherwise, down below. I love making these videos for you, and I would welcome any of your feedback. I'll see you next time.